right, so today we're going to crack open this stock analysis report and really get a deep dive into Constellation Brands.
Okay.
You want to know if it's a good investment opportunity right now? And frankly, so do I.
Yeah.
This report has financial data, it has expert opinions, even insights into recent insider trades.
Wow.
Really interesting
Look at
stuff.
that.
So it's like we're financial detectives here.
Yeah, I like that.
But before we get too deep into the weeds, did you know that Constellation Brands owns some of the most iconic beer brands out there, like Corona and Modelo?
Right.
And they've actually seen their beer sales grow for 59 consecutive quarters. That's impressive.
It really is.
So let's find out if that success makes them a smart investment.
Sounds good.
Okay, so first things first, what exactly does Constellation Brands do?
Well, they produce, import, market, and sell beer, wine, and spirits.
Okay, so they're not just a beer company like I kind of thought they were?
No, they've got a pretty big footprint in wine and spirits, too. You know, brands like Robert Mondavi wines.
So a beverage giant with a diverse portfolio, huh?
Exactly.
So the report actually highlights some really interesting things about their recent performance.
Okay.
The recent Q3 earnings for fiscal year 2025, they actually exceeded expectations,
Oh, wow.
which is great news, right?
Yeah, sounds pretty good.
But then they lower their full-year guidance, which is a little concerning.
Yeah, why is that?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
What's the story there?
Yeah. Well, we really need to separate the sizzle from the steak, so to speak.
Okay.
Their beer segment is doing amazingly well. I mean, they've had 59 consecutive quarters of beer sales growth.
That's incredible.
Like over 14 years of just consistent growth.
Wow.
But they are acknowledging some potential headwinds, things like subdued consumer spending.
Okay.
People are looking for more affordable options right now.
Right.
Then there's always those macroeconomic uncertainties.
Right.
All of that kind of adds up to a cautious outlook for the rest of the year.
59 quarters of growth, though. That's almost hard to believe.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if they've peaked or if there's still some room to grow. And what about this undervaluation that the report keeps mentioning?
Right.
Seems like the market isn't as enthusiastic about Constellation Brands as maybe their beer sales suggest.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
So the report estimates the fair value of STZ at $273.81.
Okay.
But get this, the stock is currently trading around $180.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Huge difference. So if the market corrects itself and values Constellation Brands accurately, your investment could potentially grow by over 50%.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Over 50% return. That's serious money.
Serious money.
So walk me through this. Why is the market seemingly undervaluing STZ?
Right.
Is it just the conscious outlook, or is there something else at play?
It's a bit of a puzzle, isn't it? Analysts are definitely recognizing the long-term potential of their beer business, even with the lowered guidance.
Right.
And here's where things get really interesting. Constellation Brands is planning to spend a whopping $3 billion
What?
over the next 4 years to expand their Mexican beer production. It's like they're doubling down on their success.
So they're pouring billions into Mexican beer production when consumer spending is down.
Right.
That seems risky. What am I missing?
Well, it is a calculated gamble. They're banking on the fact that their premium beer brands will continue to outperform even if the market overall softens,
Okay.
It's a bet on the continued strength of brands like Corona and Modelo, especially in the Mexican market.
Okay. I see the strategy there.
Yeah.
But it's not all about the beer, right?
Uh,
What about the wine and spirits side of things?
Right.
The report kind of hints that that segment isn't doing as well.
Yeah, you're picking up on some important clues there.
Okay.
Their wine and spirits segment has been a bit of a drag on their overall performance. They've been trying to focus on premium brands, even selling off Svedka vodka recently,
Okay.
but it hasn't really gained a lot of traction yet.
So we've got a superstar beer business, a struggling wine and spirits segment, and then you've got these economic question marks kind of hanging over everything.
Right.
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's a real mixed bag.
I'm starting to understand why the market might be hesitant.
Exactly. There's a lot to weigh here. And that's where the analyst opinions come in.
Okay.
The report includes insights from both the bulls, who are optimistic about STZ, and the bears, who are more cautious.
Yes, the classic battle of the bulls and the bears.
Exactly.
So what are these analysts actually saying? Give me the lowdown.
Okay, so on the bullish side, we have Andrew Strelzik from BMO Capital.
Right.
He's pretty confident. He's got a price target of $305.
Wow.
Citing their dominant position in the premium beer market and their really impressive growth history.
Boy.
But then you've got Steve Powers from Deutsche Bank,
Okay.
who's a bit more cautious. His price target is $256. He acknowledges those macroeconomic risks we talked about and that underperforming wine and spirits segment.
Two different perspectives, two very different price targets. It's like they're looking at two completely different companies.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
We got to dig into those risks a little bit more. Try to figure out, which analyst is seeing things more clearly.
Absolutely. There are definitely some red flags to consider. And we can't forget about one of the juiciest parts of any stock analysis.
Yeah.
Insider trading.
Ooh, insider trading.
The report highlights some recent insider buys and sells, which always adds a layer of intrigue.
Oh, yeah, it's like trying to read smoke signals.
Exactly.
Are they warning us or are they inviting us to the party?
Right.
Okay, so we've got this intriguing discrepancy, right, between how the market's perceiving Constellation Brands and their actual performance.
Yeah.
Especially with that crazy booming beer business.
Right.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, we got to dig into the actual financials a little bit more.
Yeah, for
The
sure.
report's got all these numbers on revenue, earnings, cash flow. It can be a little overwhelming, honestly.
It's true. Financial reports can definitely seem like this dense forest of numbers,
Yeah.
But remember, we're financial detectives.
Right.
We just need to find the right clues.
Oh,
One of the first things that jumps out at me is their consistent revenue growth.
okay.
Even during tough economic times, they've managed to keep those sales figures climbing,
Uh-huh.
which really speaks to the strength of their brands.
So they're making more money, which is always a good sign. But are they actually keeping a decent chunk of that as profit?
Right.
What about their profit margins?
That's where it gets really interesting. Their gross margin, which is the percentage of revenue left after deducting the cost of goods sold,
Okay.
is hovering around 50%,
Wow.
which is really impressive for any industry, but especially in the beverage world.
Yeah.
They're essentially keeping half of every dollar they make after producing the drinks.
Wow.
That's a sign of a really healthy and efficient business.
50%. That's a fat profit margin.
Yeah.
What are they doing with all that cash? Are they reinvesting it wisely?
They're playing it smart.
Oh.
Remember those capital expenditures we talked about?
Yeah.
That $3 billion investment in Mexican beer production?
Right.
That's coming directly from their profits.
Okay.
They're also sharing the wealth with shareholders through dividends and share buybacks.
Okay.
It's a pretty classic strategy for a company with strong cash flow.
So they're rewarding their investors, which is always a plus.
Absolutely.
But let's circle back to those looming macroeconomic uncertainties.
Right.
The report mentions inflation and consumer spending as potential risks.
Yeah.
Can we unpack those a little bit more? What are the specific concerns for Constellation Brands?
Sure. So imagine the economy is like a ship sailing through choppy waters, right? Constellation Brands is trying to navigate those waves. Inflation is like a strong headwind pushing against their profits. Rising input costs for everything from ingredients to packaging to transportation are squeezing their margins.
So they're facing the same inflationary pressures as everyone else.
Pretty much.
But can't they just raise prices to offset those costs?
Well, that's the tricky part. If they raise prices too much, it could hurt demand, especially when consumers are becoming more price sensitive.
Right.
It's a really delicate balancing act.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's the whole question of consumer spending in general.
Right.
If the economy takes a downturn, people might cut back on, premium beers and wines.
Yeah.
Opt for more affordable options.
It's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Rising costs on one side, potentially weaker demand on the other.
Yeah,
It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
exactly.
And speaking of rocks and hard places, let's go back to those insider trades for a second.
Okay.
Those smoke signals, as we call them, they're still swirling around in my head.
Ah, yes. Those intriguing messages in a bottle.
Right.
Remember, we've got both insider buys and sells to consider. On the one hand, you have insiders putting their own money into the company,
Right.
which suggests a certain level of confidence.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have insiders cashing out, which could indicate some concern about future prospects.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It is a little puzzling.
How do we decipher these conflicting signals? Is there a way to read between the lines and figure out what these insiders really know?
It's like trying to solve a riddle wrapped in an enigma.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't get inside the heads of these insiders
Right.
and know their motivations for buying or selling. It
Right.
could be anything from, personal financial needs to a strategic move based on information we just don't have access to.
So those smoke signals might be leading us in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Or they might be pointing us towards buried treasure. It's all part of the mystery.
Right.
And then, of course, we have that legal investigation to, like, add another layer of complexity.
Right. That legal cloud hanging over the company definitely adds another dimension to our analysis.
Yeah.
We don't know the full extent of the investigation or the potential consequences, so it's hard to factor that into our decision making. But it's definitely a risk that investors need to be aware of.
Okay, so we've got this complex financial picture,
Yeah.
conflicting insider trades and this legal investigation looming. It sounds like we need to widen our investigation a little bit.
Okay.
What about Constellation Brands' competitors?
Yeah.
How are they performing in this crazy, turbulent market?
That's a great question. The report actually provides some insights into the competitive landscape.
Okay.
And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Some of their rivals are going all in on the premiumization trend,
Okay.
focusing on higher-priced, higher-margin products.
Okay.
They're betting on consumers' willingness to pay a premium for, exclusive high-quality brands.
So it's like a battle for the high-end consumer.
Exactly.
But is that a winning strategy in like a kind of shaky economy?
Right.
Aren't people looking for value and affordability? How is Constellation Brands approaching this whole premiumization trend?
They're dipping their toes in the water, particularly with their wine and spirits portfolio. But unlike some of their competitors, they haven't fully embraced that premiumization wave. They seem to be taking a more balanced approach, maintaining a strong presence in the core market while selectively expanding into the premium segment.
It sounds like they're hedging their bets,
Yeah.
which might be a smart move,
Yeah.
considering like the uncertain economic climate.
Right.
But what about all these emerging trends in the beverage industry?
Yeah.
The report mentions things like ready-to-drink cocktails, hard seltzers, even like non-alcoholic options.
Right.
Are those potential growth areas for Constellation Brands?
Those are definitely trends worth watching.
Yeah.
The beverage landscape is constantly evolving,
Right.
and companies need to adapt to survive.
Right.
Constellation Brands has been experimenting with ready-to-drink cocktails and hard seltzers,
Okay.
but those haven't been major growth drivers for them yet.
All right.
And so far, they haven't shown much interest in the non-alcoholic market.
Uh-huh.
They seem to be sticking to their core expertise, alcoholic beverages.
A conservative approach?
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense given their current portfolio.
Yeah.
But what if those trends become mainstream?
Right.
Could they miss out on like a big opportunity by not jumping on board?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Will they be able to adapt quickly enough if the market shifts dramatically?
Right.
Or will they be left behind clinging to their traditional brands while the world moves on?
It's a question of agility and innovation. Can this beverage giant evolve with the times?
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
We'll have to wait and see. But for now, let's bring it back to our main question.
Yeah.
Is Constellation Brands a good investment?
We've uncovered a lot of clues.
We have.
We've seen their impressive financials,
Yeah.
their strategic investments, the risks they're facing, and the competitive landscape.
Right.
Now it's time to piece it all together and see if we can solve this investment mystery.
Okay, so we've gone through all the financial statements, explored all the risks, and even tried to decode some of those insider trading smoke signals.
Yeah.
But now comes the hard part, like making a decision.
Right.
So what's the verdict? Is Constellation Brands a buy, a sell, or a hold?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And, like most things in investing, the answer isn't always so simple.
Right.
There's no, magic formula or crystal ball.
Right.
But based on everything we've uncovered, I can offer some guidance to help you make a decision.
Guidance is exactly what I need right now. I feel like we've been on this whirlwind investigation, and I need help connecting the dots.
Sure.
So what should investors really be focusing on as they're trying to make this decision?
Well, if you're like a value investor,
Yeah.
Someone who looks for undervalued companies with long-term potential,
Right.
Constellation Brands might be worth a closer look. That discrepancy between their current stock price and the estimated fair value is pretty tempting.
You're talking about that potential 50% return if the market corrects itself.
Exactly.
That's hard to ignore.
It is.
But then how do we weigh that potential against the risks? I mean, we uncovered a lot of those during our deep dive.
Absolutely. You have to consider those risks really carefully. The underperforming wine and spirits segment is definitely a concern.
Yeah.
Those macroeconomic headwinds we talked about could impact their future growth,
Right.
and that legal investigation adds another layer of uncertainty.
So it's a classic risk-reward scenario.
Exactly.
How do we find that balance?
Well, one helpful approach is to break down the decision into smaller pieces.
Okay.
So instead of trying to analyze like every aspect of the company all at once,
Yeah.
just focus on the factors that matter most to you.
Okay, so if I'm like particularly worried about those macroeconomic risks, I should really dig deeper into how inflation and consumer spending might impact Constellation Brands.
Exactly. Prioritize your concerns and just focus your research accordingly.
Oh.
Don't be afraid to seek out, additional information or expert opinions to help you make a more informed decision.
It's all about being an informed and empowered investor.
Right.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
It is.
And speaking of knowledge, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Constellation Brands.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. We explored their strengths and weaknesses, analyzed their financials, and, examined the risks and opportunities
Right.
that lie ahead. It's been quite a journey.
It has. I hope our listener feels a little bit more equipped to make an informed decision about whether or not to invest in Constellation Brands.
We too. And to our listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of beverage stocks. We hope you found it insightful and engaging.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this deep dive and want to support us in creating more insightful content like this, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss an episode.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new and intriguing topic.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and happy investing.